Hello, this is Mr. Rasmussen with Algebra 1 and Lesson 118. And in this lesson we look at something new called completing the square. So we're just going to jump straight into this. You can see the introduction on the first page there. Read through that. That will help set foundation for what I'm going to walk you through here. I'm just going to start with the first example. So it says to solve this. And our first instinct would be to bring that over and make it equal to 0 and put it in descending order. So if you do x squared, we add 10x to both sides, and plus 6 equals 0. And our first instinct would be to want to factor that. However, if we try that, we need two numbers that add together to give me 6, or multiply together to give me 6, and added to give me 10. So what do I have available? I have 1 and 6 available. I have 2 and 3 available. So 1 times 6 does do that. 2 times 3 does do that. But if I add these, I get 7. If I add these, I get 5. There's no way I can add those and get 10. So this does not work. We need a different method. So we're going to take this guy here, x squared plus 10x, and plus 6 equals 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up this spot right here and put something in there that allows us to factor it. So we're going to move that spot. We're going to subtract 6 on both sides and open that up. So now we have x squared plus 10x is equal to negative 6. All right, you see this spot is open up right here. Now, to fill that spot, we do something called completing the square. We're going to take this number right here, okay, associated with the variable that doesn't have any exponent to the first. Okay, we're going to take that number, so 10, and there's two steps. The first step is to divide it in half, so we put right under 2. And the second step is to then square it. Okay, so what that gives us is 10 times 10, or it's basically, if we square it, it's basically multiplying by itself, right? So 10 times 10 is 100 over 4. And this is what's called completing the square. So in this case, 100 divided by 4 is 25. So we're going to put in a plus 25 and a plus 25. And as long as we add the same amount to both sides, we can do that and not change anything in the equation as far as the validity of it. Okay, what does that do for us? Well, when we do that, we can now factor this. We get x and x, two numbers when multiplied together. Well, yeah, look at this. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so it's really 5 squared. That would have been an easier way to look at it. Anyway, plus 5 here, plus 5 here. When we multiply 5s, we get our 25. When we add them, we get our 10x, so it works. So really, we have x to the 5th, and then we can see it's the same thing. We can write that as a squared. Equal to, and then over here, we're going to combine our numbers. Negative 6 plus 25 gives me 19. All right, now that we get to that point here, something we have looked at before, we're going to remove this squared here by a square root, right? If we take a squared and a square root, they cancel each other out. But what we do to this side, we also have to do the other side. So I'm going to put a square root of the 19 and plus or a minus, because it can be either one there when we do that. So now I have x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 19. And my last step here to get x by itself is to subtract 5 from both sides. So my answer is going to be x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 19. And that is completing the square, is opening up this spot and then making something that will factor that. Okay, let's look at another example here. All right, example number 2. X squared plus 3 equals negative 5x, and it says solve it using completing the square. Okay, so let's switch some things around here. X squared, we're going to move that over, so plus 5x. If we leave the 3 there, The only things we have to factor 1 times 3, and you can't add those together to get 5. So, and it tells us use completing the square, so we know that that's not going to be possible, so we'll move that over, negative minus 3 both sides. Okay, we've got this spot sitting here right here. So our first step, take this number. Okay, first step is divide it by 2. Now we can't do that evenly. And then to square it. So basically 25 over 4, and we can't really reduce that anymore. So plus 25 over 4 plus 25 over 4. We're going to put that in there. What it does here is we can factor like this, x and x. What two numbers? Well, it's going to be that right in half. It's going to be this number here before we squared it, right? So plus 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2. And it's always going to be the same. So really that's redundant. We can just write x plus 5 over 2 squared, right? We just take this number here before we square it. We do need to square it to put it over here. Okay, and that's going to be equal to, now we got to add these, got to get a common denominator. My common denominator for this guy is going to be 4, right? So negative 3 times 4 is a negative 12. So that's been adjusted. So negative 12 plus 25. Looks like I get 13 over 4 as I combine those there. Okay, we're going to square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. That takes that squared away. So now I have x plus 5 over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13. The square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to reduce that. And then subtract 5 over 2 from both sides. So they write their answer out as x is equal to negative 5 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. And there we go. That's our answer. We don't actually get to a single digit. That is our, considered our solve in this particular case. Okay, let's look at example 3. Example 3, complete the square to solve, and we've got x squared plus 1 equals 3x. All right, I already know I'm going to have to complete the square, so let's move some things around and open the spot up. I've got x squared minus 3x is equal to negative 1. Switch those on the sides. Notice the signs flip. All right, I'm going to take my now notice this is a negative now. I'm going to take my negative 3 and build my completing the square. I'm going to divide it by 2 and then square it. So a negative times a negative, now the whole thing's negative, right? Think of this as like this, okay? Negative times negative is positive. 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to put a plus 4/9 in there and a plus 9/4, plus 9/4. Okay, this one's going to factor x minus, okay, basically I'm going to take this before the square, minus 3 over 2 is equal to, and then now I've got to add these. My common denominator is going to be 4, so it's going to be a negative 4 over 4. So negative 4 plus 9, we get a positive 5 over 4. There we go. Okay, square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. I've got now x minus 3 over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. Square root of 4 is 2, so I'll reduce that. And then basically now I got to move that guy over. So I'm going to add 3 over 2 to both sides. So my answer is x is equal to 3 over 2 plus or minus square root of 5 over 2. Okay. Maybe it looks a little complicated, but just kind of walk yourself through the different stages and steps there. All right, go ahead and do the 2 practice problems, and then you can check your work with my work. All right, practice problem A. X squared plus 7x is equal to 9. I already switched that around. All right, I'm going to take my 7. So my 7 squared, or my 7 divided by 2 and then squared. That's going to be 49 over 4. So plus 49 over 4. Plus 49 over 4. This one's going to be x plus 7 over 2. The whole thing's going to be squared. This one here, common denominator is going to be 4. So 4 times 9 is 36. 36 plus 49 equals 85. So 85 over 4. Square root both sides, plus or minus. x, oh, I'm using way too much space. I'm going to leave space for my second practice problem. All right, so x is going to be equal to, well, I got my plus 7, I'm going to move that to the other side, so negative 7 over 2 plus or minus square root of 85, and square root of 4 is 2. And let's double check that with the book here. All right, and that is correct. There's my answer for practice problem A. All right, let's work on practice problem B. All right, practice problem B, we've got x squared minus 5x equal to 6. I've already got it set up. Completing the square, I'm going to take out my negative 5, divide it by 2, and then square it. That's going to be a positive 25 over 4, so plus 25 over 4, plus 25 over 4. This is going to be now factorable into x minus 5 over 2. You can see some patterns in there. Add these, 4 times 6 is 24, and so 24 plus 25, 49 over 4. All right, we're going to square root both sides, plus or minus. That gives me x minus 5 over 2 is equal to, now these here, the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 4 is 2. So I actually have plus or minus, and I can reduce that one further. So I'm going to add 5 over 2 to both sides. So I now get, I'll write it up, right over here. X is equal to 5 over 2. I get plus 7 over 2. And then it's also minus, so 5 over 2 minus 7 over 2. So remember, in the initial problem here, I've got this squared in here, which means we get 2 answers. So this is actually how it shows me that I can, because I can reduce my square roots, I'm actually going to get all the way to the answers on this one. So, so 5 plus 7 is 12 over 2, which reduces to 6. And then 5 minus 7 is a negative 2 over 2, which reduces to a negative 1. So there's my 2 answers, 6 and negative 1 for x. Yep, if you can reduce through when you have the square roots, if they're even and you can get even numbers, then you keep going with that and get down all the way to whole numbers. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Have a great day.